And we are right at 1 o'clock, so let's start right on time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gerard Wright. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Greater LA Realtors, and welcome to part 3 of our joint webinar on wildlife recovery and rebuilding. We are proud to collaborate with the California Association of Realtors and many of our local associations, such as the Southland Regional Association of Realtors, Pasadena Foothills Association of Realtors, and Arcadia Association of Realtors to produce this webinar series. In addition, we want to thank our other local associations who throughout LA County who have helped to promote this webinar series within your respective association members. We really appreciate it. We began planning this webinar series immediately after the January wildfires and first launched them in March with a two-part series. We were wanting to focus on members who are directly impacted by the fires, but also help those members who have clients, have friends, family members who are directly impacted by the fires and may want to help them make a transaction in those fire zones. Today is part 3 of our webinar series, and we will hear from the following speakers. We'll hear from Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, who will give us a welcome and introduction, Corey Williams from the Small Business Administration, LA County Assessor Jeff Prane and on mortgage calamity and relief, Don D'Amico, who will provide insights around environmental cleanup, and Anish Sharaya from the Office of Supervisor Catherine Barger's office to talk about their motion to waive and reduce permit fees to assist on rebuilding. We want you to please stay on until the end of the webinar as there are additional resources that we don't want you to miss out on. The slides from each presentation will be sent to you at a later date with an email that you have registered with this webinar. Now, here are the rules of the road for the webinar this afternoon. If you have a question to ask our speakers, you must submit your question using the Q&A feature on the Zoom. It should be located on the lower right of your Zoom window. Click on that feature to submit a question. Each segment will have a moderator who will screen and take as many questions as time permits. I will now introduce for our official welcome, Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, who represents the 3rd District of LA County. Her district includes stretches from Ventura County line all the way through the San Fernando Valley and the west side of Los Angeles. That includes the fire zones of Palisades, Malibu, Sunset, and Kenneth. So Supervisor Horvath, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Horvath, your LA County Supervisor for the 3rd District. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this important conversation. As someone who represents communities that have lived through the devastation of the January wildfires, I know how hard the road can be to recovery. LA County worked with our local and federal partners to lead the fastest post-disaster cleanup in history, and we require the same urgency and partnership as our communities begin to rebuild. I've heard from far too many residents who feel alone in the rebuilding process, unsure where to turn, and overwhelmed by the red tape. That's why we're working to create something different, a rebuilding authority. This approach, used after disasters like 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, is about cutting through the bureaucracy to deliver real help, real results, faster. The authority will coordinate recovery efforts, raise capital, and provide both technical and financial assistance to fire-impacted communities, making sure people have a clear, supportive path forward to rebuild. And we're not doing it alone. We're learning from communities across the country, in places like Hawaii and Colorado, who have also faced the realities of climate-driven disasters. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel. We need to share the strategies and solutions that center people and get the job done. Thank you for being part of this work. Whether you're helping someone rebuild their home or find their sense of stability, you are making a difference. I'm grateful for your partnership and your commitment to a safer, more resilient LA County for everyone.
Thank you, Supervisor Horvath, for that welcome, and I'm proud to introduce my colleague in the San Fernando Valley, the Government Affairs Director from the Southland Regional Association of Realtors, Elizabeth De Carteret, to introduce and start our first segment of our wildfire webinar. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gerard. Yes, I am Elizabeth DeCarteret. I am the GAD here at Southland Regional Association of Realtors, and it is my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, who is Corey Williams, the Public Information Officer with the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience. He was one of our speakers the first round that we had, and he was so great. We're very grateful also that he has been able to come back because he can provide information that is needed for you or your clients, because we're a few months out, 6 months out from these fires, but there is still a lot of people with a lot of needs. So thank you, Corey. Excuse me.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And it's truly an honor to be able to present again for the Wildfire Recover and Rebuild. And I love the relationships that we have with our California Association of Realtors and all the realtor organizations involved. Again, my name is Corey Williams, Public Information Officer with the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience. And one of the things I always want to reiterate before we get into the presentation is that during times of disaster, the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience offers not only assistance to businesses of all sizes, but homeowners, renters, and nonprofits. Now that we've kind of pivoted from the physical deadline, which was May 31st, 2025, I wanted to really focus in and hone in on the Targeted Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or what you'll hear is Targeted EIDL, which is going to provide working capital specifically for businesses and nonprofits during times of disaster. Next slide, please. So again, for the incident period for the wildfires and straight line winds, the incident period was January 7th, 2025, and continuing. So we know that this recovery is not going to be an instant thing. Like Elizabeth mentioned, we just hit the 6 month, almost 7th month milestone coming up this August 7th, now that we are in the month of August. But the one thing that I want to touch on is that the economic injury disaster loan deadline is October 8th, 2025. But so many businesses and nonprofits will wait until September or even October 5th and say, oh, well, Corey, I've had, a drop in sales through our realtor organizations for the last since January when the fire started, or we had to lay off key employees as a result of the fires. Well, those are all signs of economic injury. And one of the things I really want to touch on is that even though the deadline is October 8th, 2025, the time is now to start identifying that economic injury. So the interest rates for businesses is as low as 4%. For nonprofits, it's fixed at 3.625%. Again, no cost to apply, no prepayment penalties, and even if you're approved, you're under no obligation to even take the funds. But one of the things I always want to touch on too is that businesses and nonprofits may want some capital, infusion of capital, but they may not want to pledge collateral. Well, they can also, they can borrow up to $25,000 for economic injury without pledging any collateral, and that really can be a game changer for some of the, the brokerage firms and some of those that may have had some kind of slowdown in sales. In addition, we are also working a joint declaration for the civil unrest to where businesses and nonprofits can borrow up to 14,000 unsecured. So now you have a potential that you can get a 25,000 unsecured loan for the economic injury, and then you can get an additional 14,000 being in LA County for the civil unrest. So this potentially gives you 39,000 of unsecured capital versus going into a secured loan. Now, interest does not begin to accrue on our loans until 12 months from the date of the first disaster loan disbursement, and then you won't make your first payment for 12 months from the date of the first disbursement as well. Next slide. So for the targeted EIDL, the question is, who can apply for these loans, and that is private nonprofits and businesses. Now, you must be in a declared disaster area and meet other eligibility criteria depending on the type of loan. So the primary county for the fires is Los Angeles County. So then we take on Ventura, Kern, San Bernardino, and Orange counties are what are considered contiguous counties or adjacent counties that are also eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Next slide, please. So for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, this can cover operating expenses such as payroll, monthly lease obligations, mortgage payments, rent, accounts payable, and so many times now, and I've been doing disaster recovery now for 19 years. This is my first job out of law school, is that businesses sometimes have to pivot in a different direction marketing wise. And for a lot of our real estate brokerage firms, this is where the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program can really work to kind of keep the business sustained, because there may be different social media campaigns or different other virtual campaigns that you may want to put forth to increase sales. And that is the exact purpose of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. It's working capital, how the business and how the nonprofit see fit to best use to keep their business operational during this recovery period. Next slide, please. So we still have 2 state survivor locations that are open to service the public. There's one that's near the UCLA campus that's off of Sawtell. And then we also have the Altadena Community Center that's also open. Both of those centers, even though the deadline for physical damage has passed, you still can apply for the Targeted Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program by going to lending.sba.gov, or again, visit one of the state survivor locations. Now, again, that deadline is October 8th, 2025. Now, once you go ahead and apply, then the application packet, we do look at credit history, we look at repayment ability. But then a loan officer is actually going to take over the case. And what they initially try to do is give you up to 6 months of working capital. So the way they do that, they'll take your sales from January 2024 to January 2025, all the way up until July of 2024 to July 2025. And based on those numbers, they will offer an initial loan amount. So let's just say just for example, like in January 2024, average sales from January 2024 for Smith Real Estate Agency in Glendale, I guess where I'm at right now. So from January of 2024 to July of 2024, the average sales were about $50,000 a month. So you take that's about $300,000 of revenue. So now, due to the fires, let's say now Smith Real Estate has $25,000 a month average for the firm. Well, that identity of economic injury would be approximately $150,000. So initially, that's most likely what our loan officers are going to offer for an initial loan amount. But keep in mind that businesses and nonprofits can increase their loan for up to 2 years from the date of the loan authorization agreement. So even if they are offering an initial loan amount up to $150,000, and then they exhaust those funds, they can always contact their case manager to request increases as you see the need to continue the recovery efforts. And the one thing that we know, that this recovery is not going to be a 6-month process. It's not even going to be a 1-year process. We're looking at a 2 to 5 year process. So that's why it's so important to make sure to stay in constant communication with your case manager and request those increases so you have the adequate capital to keep the brokerage operations going. Now, for the disbursement, as I mentioned, we aim to do the initial disbursement of the unsecured amount of up to $25,000 for the economic injury within 5 days of the approval. Next slide, please. So again, we have the economic injury loans. Now, one thing I do want to touch upon, and this is something that has come across in a number of state survivor locations. We do not discourage homeowners and business owners who have physical loss from applying for the SBA loan. However, because the deadlines have passed, and which was May 31st, and they did have a significant period of time because they had 60 days from the initial time with President Biden's declaration. Then there was an additional 14 days added from FEMA that was requested from the state, and then SBA had a 60-day grace period. If you had physical loss, and sometimes there is a lot of emotional, mental trauma that comes about, so you have to show an extraordinary circumstance to apply for the physical loan, but you still can, for homeowners and renters and business owners can apply for a physical loan, but they need to state a substantial reason as to why they did not apply during that 4.5-month period. That could be emotional, mental trauma. It could be maybe a hospital stay, care of a family member, but it can't be that I just didn't want to apply. You have to have a significant reason. So I did want to touch upon for the physical loss that you still can apply, but you don't want to just say, well, I just didn't know about the program, or I was waiting for insurance. That won't be sufficient enough for our processing center to overcome that decision. So again, for small business and nonprofits, for the economic injury, October 8th is the deadline, and you can borrow up to $2 million, but the unsecured threshold is up to the $25,000. And that's the first thing that I would recommend for any of our brokerage realtor organizations to actually look into is the unsecured amounts. Use those funds, and then if you need extra funds later, you can always request increases. Next slide, please. So for the resources for the disaster survivors and constituents, you can go to sba.gov/disaster, or you can call the 800 number, which is 800-659-2955. However, while we have the state-supported locations that are here in the state, here in LA, again, you have the location that's off of Sawtell, and then you have a location that's at the Altadena Community Center. I would strongly recommend visiting the state-supported locations. I was literally working with a business owner yesterday. I actually made the personal trip to accompany her to actually help and talk with the customer service representatives. There are a number of resources that are there for the businesses, nonprofits, homeowners, and renters. So people are still applying for their home, and renters are also applying for their personal property. Again, you have to have a significant reason, though, whenever you're actually applying. You don't want to just say, I didn't know SBA was there. I didn't know these resources were available. You want to say that you had some emotional trauma, mental trauma, or you had some kind of a hospital stay. That's usually enough to allow us to accept a late application at this point in the disaster. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Elizabeth, and we'll continue our webinar.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand it off now to Jim Clark, who is the Government Affairs Director for the Arcadia Association and the Rancho Southwest Association. Sorry, which one?
Rancho Southeast. You had it right the first time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you, Corey. That's always great information. And next up, I have the privilege to introduce the LA County Assessor, Jeff Prang, who, as many of you know, has been in office for a number of terms and has been very, very helpful to the realtor community. He obviously, you may know that he has experience at the local level, serving on the city council and as mayor of the city of West Hollywood. He joined us in our first two webinars, and his information is very, very vital to our recovery. And so I'd like to go ahead and introduce Assessor Jeff Prang.
Thank you very much, Jim. And thank you, Gerard and Ryan and Elizabeth. It's great to see you all. I'm always delighted to have the opportunity to speak to my friends with the various associations of realtors. I'm happy to offer you a little bit of a update on what's been going on with the fire recovery, as we just recently passed the 6-month anniversary of the initiation of those fires. I wanted to emphasize that I continue to, as my office continues to help property owners get the relief that they need and deserve. And today I'd like to provide some updates about our work since the fires and work that we continue to do. And obviously to ask for your help in getting over a couple of hurdles that we're having, especially with reaching property owners with some key information. Before I begin, I did want to acknowledge that I have a couple of members of my staff here with me. Brian Donnelly is our director who is heading up our fire relief effort. He's a subject matter expert, so if you ask really hard questions, I may need to defer to him. And then Candy Ng is our special assistant and field deputy who help with this, coordinate our efforts here today. I believe the last time we spoke, I shared the main property tax relief program that my office provides, which is called the Misfortune and Calamity Disaster Relief Program. What this does is it allows my office to reduce the taxable value of any property which is either destroyed or damaged by a disaster such as a flood, fire, or earthquake. The reduction will end up resulting in a lower property assessment and thus a reduced property tax bill until the rebuilding process begins. A couple of qualifications, the damage needs to exceed $10,000, and it can include smoke damage. The claims must be filed within 12 months of the date of the incident, although I'm currently sponsoring legislation with Senator Ben Allen that will extend the application period to 24 months to make sure that we reach everybody. Many of those who have been affected by the fires have already applied for misfortune and calamity. But if you know folks who have not, they can still submit their application online. We do, I think at one point, I'm not sure what the current number is, but as many as 40% of the decline of the misfortune calamity claims that we processed were done proactively by my office without an application by the property owner. My staff continues to staff the disaster relief centers that are open less and less as more and more people seem to be getting the information that they need, but we're still making ourselves available as much as possible to help people and handhold them through the process. The way it works is once a misfortune and calamity claim is filed, it's transferred automatically over to the treasurer or tax collector's office. They're the ones who collect taxes. And this will automatically defer their property taxes until a recalculated tax bill to reflect that damage is processed. Although I wanted to emphasize that the governor, through his emergency proclamation, has deferred all tax payments until April of next year. Unfortunately, the tax deferrals only apply to those who pay their taxes directly to the tax collector's office and not through those that are paid by an impound account with a mortgage company. You'll get a refund on your taxes, but you'll have to arrange separately to work with your mortgage company on the if there was a difference. Once property is rebuilt, as long as it's built in similar in size and use, a classification that we call substantially equivalent, then the pre-fire property tax bill will be restored, adjusted for inflation as required under Prop 13. This is also known as your Prop 13 base year. For those who filed a misfortune calamity claim, probably starting about in May, we had mailed out what's called a notice of assessed value change. This is simply a notification of what we changed your assessment to. Although this notice has caused a tremendous amount of confusion. The initial notice may indicate that a home which was completely destroyed still reflected a 50% value on the notice. And this is because we work on a fiscal year, July 1st until June 30th. So the initial notice reflects the damage from January 1st until June 30th of this year, but it retains the property value from July 1st till December 31st of last year. Seems a bit inequitable to have totally lost your home and still be responsible for a tax bill, but it is the portion of the bill when you had use of the home. So in effect, it's a prorated value. When they receive their tax bills later this year, it will reflect the entire, the completeness of the damage or the destruction. Since the start of the fires in January, we've collected data, developed a lot of processes and reallocated our resources in order to respond to the fire damage as quickly as possible. We've identified about 24,000 parcels that are impacted by the fires. About 11,000 were identified as completely destroyed. Another 2,000 as damaged. There's a number of others that we are still working on that have a little more less certain status. We have processed about 18,000 assessment reductions, which will significantly reduce the property taxes for fire victims. And as I mentioned, 60% of those reductions were made based on proactive claims by the property owner. 40% were those that we applied even without a claim. The total estimated loss of the assessed value of all damaged property is about $12 billion, which is candidly an enormous financial impact that will affect the county budget as well as city and school budgets. Although it's quite a bit less than the $20 to $30 billion that we originally estimated. Also, if for anybody who submitted a misfortune and calamity claim, if you've not gotten an update on the status of your claim, that information is available on our website by entering your assessor's identification number. It'll state on your property page whether it's been approved or is in process or has been denied. And once it says approved, the relief adjustment may take like 1 or 2 weeks before it's reflected on our website. Although for the most part, we got the vast majority of these processed by May, and the information on our website is largely up to date. While we were sending out these notices and processing these relief claims, we have found that quite a few residents have not updated their official ownership records to reflect that there's a change of address. Typically people's mailing address is their home address, but if your home was destroyed or it's not livable, the problem is that that's still where your property tax bill is going, and any notices from my office will go. Also, we've been unable to contact a lot of affected property owners by mail who paid their second property tax installment and are entitled for a refund. So it's really important that people update their mailing addresses. You can do this online rather simply, because otherwise we are forced to mail things to the address that we have on record. Now, for homeowners whose properties were not physically damaged, but whose market value has dropped due to the disaster, they may qualify for something called a decline in value review. This allows us to lower the property tax base if the economic value of the property falls beneath its assessed value. This is also being applied to land value where appropriate. We're lowering the values of damaged land rather as liberally as we are able to. One of the challenges that we had, though, is the current law presents a challenge. We assess property as of January 1st of each year. The fires began on January 6th. So under normal circumstances, we would have to wait till next January to apply a decline in value. But I'm actually sponsoring legislation through Assemblymember Mike Gibson, which will allow us to include the fire impacted properties as of January 1st of 2025. And along that line, I've been working with a number of elected legislators to sponsor legislation that will provide additional relief to fire victims. A number of them are still in place. Senator Sasha Perez has a bill which will help us to correct ownership for those people who've inherited property but never took the time to update their records with the registrar recorder. Ben Allen's office will extend a number of deadlines that will help people apply for relief. I told you about Mike Gibson's bill to move the lien date for assessment. One of them I want to kind of gripe about a little bit. It was one by Assemblymember Nick Schultz. He carried a bill for me. This bill would have aligned the building code standards with the assessment standards. You may know that under the governor's disaster proclamation, they're allowing you to rebuild up to 110% of what was there. Under ordinary assessor practices, going to 110% exceeds our standards of what is called substantially equivalent. And I really didn't want to be in a position where we're going to have to mail assessment, supplemental assessments to people who are following the rules by going up to 110% and then getting stuck with a tax bill. So the Dick Schultz bill, Assembly Bill 1253, would have aligned the building code standards of 110% with the assessment standards of substantial equivalent. And for some totally inexplicable reason, the state assembly killed that bill, which is now putting me in a position of potentially having to apply an assessment to those who follow the 110% building allowance. Before I conclude, just want to emphasize there's a couple things I urge all homeowners, but particularly those who are impacted by the fire to register with. First one is our homeowner alert. This is an email service which notifies you within 48 hours anytime something is changed on the title to your property. We all know there's a lot of episodes of title theft in recent years. If you don't, but now you can go on my website, record your email address with your property, and anytime something's recorded on your property, you'll get a notification within 48 hours by email. If it's not something that you intended to have happen, there'll be instructions as to how to report that to proper authorities. If you don't sign up for this, the first notification you're going to get is a letter in the mail from the registrar recorder, usually 30 to 45 days after the recording. In the case of title fraud, they can do a lot of damage and cost you a lot of money in that 30 to 45 days. So we really want people to sign up for this to protect their property. The other thing is you can now sign up for the assessor's e-service. It's kind of establishing a profile with your property online. This will allow you to do a number of functions online that used to have to be done in person or by mail, such as changing a mailing address, requesting a homeowner's exemption, or filing for the misfortune and calamity. We do have a lot of information on our website for disaster relief. Everything I talked about was there. Please urge you to visit that. And also please subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which offers a lot of helpful tips to real estate professionals. So that concludes my prepared remarks. All of our contact information is here on the screen. And
Thank you, Jeff. We do have a couple of questions, and why don't we just leave that screen up there? The first question is, now I'm just going to read this, so I can't. It's hard for me to interpret sometimes, but it says, hello, during the rebuild process, how does the assessor office handle being grandfathered in on codes and the size use? Are there instances when the rebuilder, for example, setbacks or property line legal codes, would have to update their property to meet codes that will adversely affect their size and thus trigger new property base tax assessments?
So generally speaking, we're not really that interested in codes. That is a city or unincorporated county issue. Our standard is substantial equivalence, and that we don't care about setbacks. We don't care about the footprint. If you had a 2,200 square foot home, if you build a 22 square foot home, that usually will, or plus or minus a little bit one way or the other, we will accept that. The footprint, the setbacks, those are all building codes, and those are not something that falls into our jurisdiction. Brian, is there anything that in that regard that I missed?
No, Jeff, I think you pretty much hit it there. I mean, and I'll just add that we will do everything we can to give as much advantage that we can within the law to the taxpayer, give as much deference as we can.
Our philosophy in responding to fires is not to try to find a way to stuff you inside the box, but to make sure that the box is as flexible as we can to help you recover.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have a couple more, and in the meantime, if anybody else has a question, you can go down to the bottom of your screen and click on Q&A and type your question in the box. The next question, Jeff, is can Jeff repeat the bill that was shut down that aligned with the 100% rebuild? Was that the Gibson bill?
No, this is the Dick Schultz bill. It's Assembly Bill 1253. So it did get out of the Assembly Revenue and Taxation Committee, and it went to Appropriations Committee, and they put it on suspense.
Mm-hmm.
Suspense is a file that they put anything that may have a cost, and then they killed it by not taking it off suspense. Nobody has to take it off. I was really kind of upset about that. I don't know why they would would not have adopted a common sense measure that would have made it much, much more convenient for fire victims. The fiscal cost was de minimis. We estimated that if every single property in Palisades and Altadena rebuilt to 110%, which we know will not be the case, but even if they did, it was only going to be about $500 million in assessed value, which would have resulted in $5 million in lost property taxes. And that $5 million would be spread between the city of LA, the county of LA, Malibu, Pasadena, a multitude of school districts and water districts. It was a totally de minimis sum of money. Why they wouldn't make this more convenient for the property owners, I don't know. But if you talk to any legislators, feel free to give them a piece of your mind about that, because it's really ridiculous.
There you go. Well, we're only halfway through the session, so I mean, could this possibly become a 2-year bill or no?
I don't know at this point. You know, one of the most frustrating things is they won't tell us why they did what they did.
Right. And sometimes they don't have to. Okay, last question, and this is my question. If someone buys a home affected by the fires and damage, smoke is still present, can they file a damage claim?
Yes, the only standard is that the damage has to exceed $10,000, and we are finding that, you know, most smoke remediation does exceed that. So yes, they should absolutely apply for misfortune and calamity.
Okay, well that's good for, you know, realtors to know, because if they have a client that is buying a home that may have been affected and some of those things had not been taken care of, just want to make sure that a new owner could not apply. Can apply.
Let me dig on that one. Brian, can a new owner apply for misfortune and calamity, or just
that was the key, new owner?
Oh, I'm not quite certain of that. Brian, kick that one over to Brian. He's the
Right. No, thanks, Jeff. I think that in this case, what's being described would not qualify for being able to get the misfortune and calamity. It needs to be the owner as of the time that the event happened, the event has passed. I would assume in most cases that people would be pretty aware of a situation like that if they're buying a home that's damaged, and it would be reflected in the price. That would be my expectation.
Yeah, I guess that would have to be determined during the escrow period, I guess, for the, you know, the previous owner to take care of. Okay, well, just wanted to ask that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're right at our transition time. Assessor and crew, I want to thank you. And by the way, when you guys go back into the green room, you'll still be able to type in the answers to those questions. So, but Assessor Prang, we want to thank you once again. If we do this for a 4th time, be prepared. But well, we have 5 more months left until those deadlines. So I mean, there's a lot of time left. But anyway, thank you again for participating. I want to throw this back to my colleague Elizabeth DeCartier, who's going to host or moderate the next segment with Brian. Let's see, Brian Hill about environmental cleanup. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Yeah, actually, we don't have Brian. We have Don D'Amico, who is the. That's all right. Thank you. That's okay. Don, are you here? And Gary, are you? You have his slides that you can queue up?
I am here.
Okay. Great. So our next speaker is going to be Don D'Amico. He is a senior project manager at Partner Engineering and Science, Inc. He has over 25 years of experience in environmental due diligence and 20 years of experience in industrial hygiene and hazardous materials consulting. Don has led hundreds of real estate transactions, providing comprehensive environmental assessment and regulatory guidance to clients across commercial, industrial, and agricultural sectors. His technical background spans Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment, hazardous material abatement oversight, and OSHA training, with specialized knowledge in asbestos, lead, mold, post-fire response services, and occupational safety. So, Don, we're going to go ahead and throw it to you now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You said a lot there. I appreciate being here on this this presentation and the opportunity to provide a little bit of background regarding the assessment process related to some of the wildfires. Next slide, please. So I initially got involved back in the first part of January when the fires first occurred. So had a chance, have been doing probably about 40 to 50 different residential properties, Most of those residential properties have been residences that have been damaged by just smoke damage and some breaches within the exterior of the home. Although I have been involved in some, we've done a few properties with a significantly more damage, and then also a few commercial properties. We've done a commercial grocery store facility and also another commercial facility down there. So, but this is kind of a generic photo, but you can tell with the smoke plume in the background of the homes there in the neighborhood, it kind of looks kind of generic. Doesn't look like there's a lot going on there, but you'd be amazed to find out the breaches in just our typical standard single family home with the windows there, the smoke that can penetrate inside the residences and also leave a significant amount of soot, ash, and tar and other materials within the exterior and also the interior of the home. Next slide, please. So the process, I know, has been really slow, and I sympathize with a lot of folks that may be on this call who've been directly impacted. In the past, I've been involved in some of the wildfires up in the Paradise, the Chico area, and also the foothills in Fresno and Napa, some of the Napa fires. So I know the process is long, it's cumbersome, it's physically and emotionally draining, and I sympathize with everybody who has to go through this because it's definitely not fun. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to present a little bit of background on what an initial post-fire investigation and cleanup looks like. So this photo here, you can just kind of see just some of the ash and debris, the various different types of debris just on a residential pad here. So you've got a various mixture of metal debris, you've got ash debris, you've got concrete debris. You may have also some household hazardous waste, and all of these different debris streams that are created on a fire. They all have to be treated separately. So the process to actually go through, characterize and classify what's there, and then segregate all this waste, they all can go to different landfill facilities. So it's a long process, it's a tedious process, and it just kind of it's just not getting a backhoe in here and throwing it all in a dumpster. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but that's not the way it works. Next slide, please. So here are some photos of a typical residence. So you can see, most of them. The first photo there just shows some debris that has been inside of a window apron there. And this is just a standard home, and just you can see the vast amount of material that's there. And then also the second photo, and there on the floor, you can see the amount of material that gets transported on inside of a structure. And then the last photo there is also of a window frame. So these are homes where the windows were closed, they were sealed, and you can just tell by the transportation of the fire debris and the wind, the changes in the wind direction, and how those can impact just our typical standard residential home. So next slide, please. Photo 4 here is the Getty Museum. So we did some characterization on the Getty Museum, and that's in the background there. But you could also see from a garage there that the amount of ash and soot that was transported just from the fire. I mean, that was all just wind blown. So this was a clean space before, and you could just see the fire debris that was transported to this location. And then photo 5 there is just another photo of the interior of a home and the amount of dust and debris and ash, whatever that may be, that was transported inside somebody's house with all of their belongings. Next photo, please. So the process of the post-fire process is what Partner does is there's first and foremost is a visual assessment. So we basically we'll go through the home, we'll meet with the property owner, try to get some information regarding their house, data construction. I think a lot of the Palisades houses that we've been involved with, they vary anywhere from the 60s to the 90s. So it's been a wide mixture of that. And the reason I bring up date of construction is, a newer home, older homes, let me go back a little bit. The older homes may have more of a potential to contain, lead-based paint or asbestos containing materials, specifically asbestos in joint compound associated with drywall. A lot of us don't realize that there is, homes that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s could still have asbestos, most likely in the joint compound. So The drywall systems in residential homes spray acoustic ceiling materials and other decorative, the popcorn material, old vinyl floor tiles, but a lot of these different materials contain asbestos. So in those situations, we would recommend doing also some asbestos sampling as part of the combustion byproduct sampling, where we do wipe sampling throughout the space on the various different vertical and horizontal surfaces. We've also done some geotech investigations on some of these properties and structural assessments as well. Next slide, please. So a lot of the homes, a lot of the characterizations that I've been involved with have been still standing scenario. So, what we do is we collect tape lift samples for combustion byproducts, which is soot, char, and ash. And then there's also could extend as well to some soil sampling, water sampling, and then also based on the findings, it could lead to the exterior as far as some soil sampling is involved as well. So total loss scenarios are a little bit different because those, whenever you have a debris field with a structure that's been completely burned to the ground, there's a different process that has to be followed. And it's more so related to the asbestos NESHAP regulation, where you have to sample all the debris for suspect asbestos containing materials. You have to segregate the waste, characterize the different types of materials that you may see. And depending on what that waste material consists of, that will dictate how those materials are disposed of and transported to the landfill. Soil sampling is also part of that process. And depending on what's there in the soil, that can go to, excavation of the soils that may be contaminated, and depending on the concentrations that are there will dictate what landfill those are disposed of too. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just what I just briefly spoke about with respect to disposal of the material and stuff. So there's different phases involved with disposal of the waste. So the waste disposal process does include local landfills. It includes specialty landfills, as I just mentioned, about asbestos containing materials. If there is asbestos detected, then those materials will have to be disposed of at a specialty landfill. There's recycling facilities with respect to any metal material or anything like that will go to a different type of facility. And then there's also specialized disposal, which would include also for batteries, oils, propane tanks, and also potentially for soil sampling. And when we look at soil sampling, we're looking at like the top 6 inches of soil only. We're not looking at excavating soil any deeper than that. Next slide, please. So these are just some things that we look at, as I previously discussed, about sampling for combustion byproducts. And all of our homes we have different types of hazardous materials. And we have what we have forever chemicals, which also could contain types of adhesive and binding materials and coatings and drywall. And some of those materials can also contain VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Some of the residuals may include forever chemicals, which will be the specific components on those are that they accumulate in the body and they don't break down. So those are some of the chemicals that we look at now compared to what we did previously in the past. So as I said, the waste streams will consist of a wide mixture of asbestos, lead, heavy metals, PCBs, VOCs, and PAHs. PCBs are a solvent-based material, and we find a lot of PCBs more so in commercial facilities than residential, but those are found typically in sealants and caulking materials that may be present on windows, expansion joint material. So PCBs have been kind of on the radar for the last 10 or 15 years, and they are regulated today. Next slide, please. So as we know, our climate here in California has changed. I mean, we're a dry climate. We have a lot of extreme conditions where we don't see any rainfall, and unfortunately, that's impacted the way our lifestyles are today. We have low humidity. Unfortunately, with the winds down in the Pacific Palisades and the fires that happened here recently, it's just that our climate is continually changing, and these are some factors that we have to consider and really think about to ensure that these type of wildfires don't happen down the road. Next slide, please. So this is the process that we do. The partner has when we initially do an assessment. So we do have with the residential owner, we will do an interview initially with the property owner. And then we go into the testing stage and do the sampling analysis, get the lab results back, and then we provide a report of findings that discusses what we accomplished. Next slide, please. And as I previously mentioned, there's other issues potentially with other types of materials that homeowners typically store, typical household hazardous waste, propane tanks, cleaning supplies. We've heard, all of us have heard about the Tesla fires with the batteries and stuff lately, so that's another issue. So there's other risks here associated with types of materials that are combustion risk other than just related strictly to the fire itself. Next slide, please. So after we do our assessment and we get the results back, a lot of our findings that we found in a lot of these homes is that they did sustain significant smoke damage. They all had a smoke odor to it. And based on those results, we recommend hiring an asbestos contractor to do the cleanup. And simply because these types of contractors know how to properly go in and they set up a containment, they bring in high efficiency particulate air machines, and they create a negative pressure inside the home. And they physically just wet wipe and clean all vertical and horizontal surfaces. That process takes, depending on the size of the house, but it could take up to 2 to 3 weeks. So that process is not quick, but that's pretty much how the length of time that it does take. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, so this is just a few different facilities that we've been involved with. So that the photo on the left is the Getty. So we did an assessment of the Getty Museum, and a lot of the folks who were there to the last minute, they were there and they tried to put towels underneath doors and around windows to kind of seal things off, but it just didn't really do any good. It wasn't effective. A lot of the sampling that we did, there was an extensive cleanup here at the Getty. So a lot of the rooms, there were obviously visible ash, soot and char based on our findings, and there was a lot of cleanup that took place there. I think it took about a month and a half to go through and effectively clean all the spaces associated with the Getty. The second photo there in the middle is a former grocery store. So that was pretty much completely leveled in a wildfire. So there was asbestos containing materials within that debris stream. You see there, there were metals in the soil. And I think there was just a report on that was just issued a couple of weeks ago where it just took, the process is lengthy because the soil sampling it was conducted. We had to find out some specific gate criteria from one of the landfills to ensure that some of the soil could be properly disposed there. And then the last photo there just shows just a typical residence. So that's kind of what we saw. It's just, you got a regular single family house there with some debris impacts, and it's still standing, but the house next door could have been totally devastated. Next slide, please. So after the initial assessment is completed and the contractor goes in and cleans up the residence, we'll come back in and do a post verification assessment, and we'll do wipe sampling on the floors, the attic. Just depends on what was found during the initial assessment. We'll go in and take those post verification samples and make sure that the contractor's cleanup activities were effective, and before that house can go back to the homeowner. If there are any soil sampling that would require to be done, that would also be part of the process as well. Next slide, please. Appreciate it.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, if they want to type them in, I do see two sort of statements, not really questions, which I will just read so that Dawn can hear what they were. One was that we had no water in our hydrants, and that I understand. When there is a large fire incident spanning a large area, the resources are just going to be depleted, and the water pressure is going to be down because everything is full force everywhere. I know that Palisades also had a water issue in that they had a water tank that was not filled there. The other thing that was mentioned was the EV charging stations and solar panels are at the top of the risk list. So that is true. Some of these homes that were burnt, a lot of those batteries, backup batteries, Tesla batteries that were in the garages, etc., are hazards as well. So I will ask a question since I don't see one on there. In terms of soil and contamination, and this is sort of asking you for maybe a best practices for realtors. We have some realtors here who lost their homes, and then some realtors who will be working in these areas, and some of the best practices. In the topography of these homes, they're right next to each other. And, although we have a property line, the water flow and runoff can still be leaching. So if you go and take the time, I believe the Army Corps of Engineer only goes down, I believe it was 6 inches when they did the clearing of properties. I would guess it would be recommended to go more. But where do you go? How do you move forward? What's the best practice for realtors in evaluating your surroundings and kind of moving forward when you're surrounded by some of these large fire disasters?
Well, that's something that should be looked at. My guess is it should be looked at during the cleanup stage. So that should be implemented during the cleanup stage to where these properties where they are doing cleanup is whether it be straw wattles or whatever. If there's a house that's above your home and there's water flowing down, you're at a lower grade than that. Then that's part of the cleanup process. So either the EPA or the Corps of Engineers, there needs to be that should be part of their plan implemented during, for engineering controls to ensure that the no debris or whatever flows down and potentially contaminates another property.
Okay, excellent. All right. I don't see any more questions. So we will have Dawn's information. Oh, you have a question?
I was going to ask a quick question, just in the interest of time, because I've heard from some of my members regarding on the environmental cleanup that if it's not done properly, that will hold up the rebuilding process. Can you cite it, or I wouldn't say cite any examples, but cite any reasons where they would probably need to either remediate, or what are some kind of tips or useful tools if that comes up in there, let's say trying to submit a permit or something along that line from a rebuilding standpoint? What are usually some problem areas that
as long as they're my response to that is probably as long as they follow their insurance folks and do step by step what they're told with their insurance provider, because I know that process could get very lengthy. So they don't want to cut corners. So I know it's tough for your typical average homeowner out there to understand the process, but I would just tell them to educate themselves with making sure they're talking to the right people and they're asking the right questions. With respect to cleanup, they want to make sure they hire licensed contractors to do the work. You don't want to just hire Bob and Jim off the street, hey, I can come in and do this for you. You want to hire a California licensed asbestos contractor is the best choice to hire to do the cleanup, because you're not only dealing with the combustion byproduct materials, but you're dealing with potentially asbestos, and those kind of contractors know how to clean those type of facilities up where there is that type of debris and contamination that may be there.
No, that's very helpful for, I guess, again, for those who they may be running into that particular transaction or running into that issue, or helping another client or family member deal with that. That's good practical sound advice there.
Right.
Okay. One more question. let me make sure if it's for Dawn. For those who have no mortgage because their home was paid off, how can we expedite land grants? So that would not
Yeah,
be,
that was from our last
Yeah.
last speaker. We'll for Victoria, we'll forward that question over to Assessor Prang's team, and we'll get that answered for you, and try to turn that around in an email from what you registered from. We'll get that out to you. So
okay, great. All right. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, John. And when we record this and send the link out, we will also have a contact list of everybody who is presenting today. And so Dawn's information will be in there. So if anybody would like to reach out to Dawn for any other questions, we will have that for you. And I'm going to now, is this going back to Gerard or Jim?
It's going back to Jim. I'm simply
Yeah.
simply
All right.
stepped in to
I'm
add
going-
an extra question.
All right. And Dawn, if you want, you could go back into the green room or you can stay.
Okay, well, I'm back. Thank you, Elizabeth. Our last and final segment is going to concentrate on Altadena, where Supervisor Catherine Barger has been very, very busy with all that has been going on after the fire on January 7th. And with us today, we have Anish Soraya, who is the director of Altadena recovery for the Office of Supervisor Barger, and he'd like to give us an overview of what's been going on and how things are coming along, and then of course he'll take questions at the end as well. Welcome, Anish, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jim, for the introduction and for the opportunity to address this group. I think it has been a very challenging 7 months for the supervisor, and obviously none of us could have imagined what was going to happen on January 7th. But obviously since then, the supervisor has been extremely focused on the future of the recovery and rebuilding of Altadena. Altadena is the largest unincorporated area in the 5th district, and it's most populous. And so what we saw on that unfortunate night was a massive displacement of the entirety of our community. And so we've obviously gone through, emergency response, getting us through the immediate firefight, and obviously getting us to a place of stability. But what was left in its aftermath was, roughly 10,000 structures destroyed, 6,000 single-family homes lost, many multifamily properties destroyed, along with really significant devastation to the major commercial corridors that drive the heart of this community. Altadena is a very unique community. You won't find big box stores. You will find a very eclectic mix of traditional architectural styles. It's home to a population that has about 20% that were seniors pre-fire. It has a very strong and robust arts community, and an incredible amount of nonprofits that really speak to why Altadena is so special. It has a really keen sense of history, of preservation, of historical context. And so when we talk about rebuilding and recovery, it's hard to just approach this like you would a traditional development, right? I'm sure we all know in this room, a lot of builders that can build thousands of homes at a time. But that's a lot easier to do when you have one property owner, one developer, and not a lot of other interaction with families who have been devastated, who have lost everything. And so I'm very proud to say that the supervisor has really leaned in on this, and working for her as the director of Altadena Recovery. I've seen her on the front lines, the days after the fire, being on the ground, being at the recovery centers, being at the command posts. But even after that, we've been back to Washington, D.C. to advocate to the federal government for both disaster relief, additional FEMA support. But then really where we are today is in a much different place, right? The devastation is somewhat behind us, and we are on that road to recovery and rebuilding. So the good news is we were able to have the Army Corps brought in by FEMA to do a private property debris removal program. And so, again, very happy to share that we are at almost 98% completion. So almost every single residential property has been cleared. There are still a few that we needed to obtain legal authorization to go onto the property to help them clear them. But when you drive through Altadena today, it looks a lot different than it did in the early days of January. The devastation is still there, but what you see now is hope. And that hope really is in the form of cleared properties. And I'm really happy to say you will see a lot of framing. Last weekend, I was driving through the community and came across any number of different homes that are in various stages of framing. And so with all of the property debris removal more or less done for residential properties, we're seeing a lot of folks that are very interested in getting back into their community. I know there have been a number of lot sales that have, brought to question what does the future of Altadena look like, but when in comparison to the number of rebuild applications we've seen, I appreciate that there is concern about the displacement of our community, but I can say that most people, okay, my computer's telling me I'm unstable, so I'm just going to go off camera here really quick and let it all figure itself out. But yeah, as I was pointing out, we have seen lot sales, but the bigger thing is we've seen almost 1,000 rebuild applications come in. Actually, I'm just pulling up the numbers. It's almost 1,400 rebuild applications. And those are primarily for the 6,000 single family homes. Of those, we have cleared almost 900 from a land use perspective. We have about 850 building plans in process, with about 150 building permits issued to date. And so, as a supervisor would tell you, the county needs to continue to move faster. And that's what we've been focused on, right? So the first thing she really did was to say that our traditional processes for helping people get through permitting have traditionally been cumbersome. And I'm being as diplomatic as I can there. And so her first goal was to sit down and talk to all of the department heads involved in the permitting process and ask them to sit down with each other and completely redo their systems. So what used to be a very sequential process now has concurrent reviews, and we've really cut down on the average timeline to issue building permits. Prior to the implementation of this new streamlined permitting process, in years past, it would take sometimes up to 180 to 210 days to get a permit. So we're talking 6 to 7 months. Right now, we are averaging about 60 business days, and that's inclusive of the time it may take the applicant or their architects to resubmit plans. But part of this is just understanding that government and bureaucracy or bureaucratic processes should not be the barrier to a family wanting to rebuild, to someone wanting to come back to their home. So the other aspect of this that the supervisor really pushed hard on was waiving permit fees. So at this time, I won't get into the verbal semantics of the words we use, but if you are an Eaton Fire survivor, your home was lost in the unincorporated area of Altadena, and if you are applying to rebuild your home, you will not pay any fees to the county. So that means county regional planning, county public works, county fire, county public health. You will not pay a fee to rebuild your home. On top of that, we've really wanted to make sure that people get through those processes. So 60 business days is where we are at currently, but that's people sometimes having to go to a second review because they didn't turn in their plans correct the first time. So that's where our partnership with the state of California and private philanthropy brought us the use of Archistar. So Archistar is an AI-powered software tool that has been programmed to incorporate all of LA County's land use codes. And so the idea is that if you are an Eden Fire survivor and you're looking to rebuild, we are encouraging people to utilize Archistar as a test case, right? Submit your plans. The AI tool itself has been learning about our code, and our teams have been testing it in the background. And it will tell you, hey, your side yard setback, your rear yard setback, your elevations are in conflict with LA County codes. And so it gives you the opportunity to work with your architect to quickly revise those plans and then submit. Our goal is to make sure that when people submit their plans to the county, we get them approved the first time, right? And our teams are really only looking at plan checks to make sure that really critical life safety components are the reason why you would be you have your plans sent back with comments. So where we're at today is really about taking the great work that's been done by the Army Corps of Engineers This is the fastest debris removal in the history of California. They cleared almost 10,000 lots just in Altadena in under 6 months. And so when you look at comparable fires and comparable efforts to do this type of debris removal, many have taken 12 to 18 months. In fact, when the Army Corps first came to town in January, they told us it would take them 18 months. But we've seen them accelerate. They brought in, and the great thing about the Army Corps is they are a massive machine. And when that machine gets moving, we can see the great things it can do. And so obviously they were able to do that in a third of the time. And so now, as we look at private development, we're obviously seeing people starting to that rebuilding process. Homes are going up, building permits are being issued. So the county's next big focus is on infrastructure. You've probably heard Southern California Edison is looking to underground their above ground distribution lines in Altadena. At the same time, we have 3 mutual water districts that serve Altadena that also have some potential improvement needs that they need to undertake. We have about 700 homes that are currently on septic that we'd like to transfer them over to municipal sewer. And so the next stage really for the county is tearing up the community and rebuilding it piece by piece to make sure it has more resilient infrastructure that is not just built for the 21st century, but the 22nd century. And so the next big the next big thing we're going to embark upon is that effort to start that reconstruction of public and civic infrastructure. And so that's just a bit of a flavor of where we are today. And I know obviously your membership, Jim, may have a more specific focus on rebuilding private development. So I'm happy to turn it back over and see where you'd like to take it.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, Anish, and I'll tell you, I think it's going to take a while because I remember Altadena very vividly as a child. I mean, my grandparents lived at the top of Homewood Drive, and that's where we spent our holidays and that kind of thing, because that was the gathering place, and that home was burned down. I just remember the big palm trees going down the middle of the street, the very, very lush vegetation. So, I mean, it's kind of hit me personally. But thank you for that presentation. We do have a couple of questions. And so let's get to those real quick. Let's see, Eva Rodriguez has a question. Does the fee waiver also apply if your build is larger than your original home?
Yes, it does. So whether you're building a like for like, a smaller or larger home, it does not matter to the county. Okay. That is covered and waived for you as the survivor and property owner.
And that waiver of fees was in a motion, right? That the supervisor did. Now, has that gone into effect? I know there was going to be a study period, and then it was going to come back. Has that been approved?
Yeah, so this was approved almost 6 weeks ago now, and in effect, the departments have immediately stopped requesting invoicing and payment to process your permits and plans. The county is.
Was there a second motion that she put in to?
So the second part of that motion is that the county itself does need to find the money to ultimately offset those costs, right? So our departments that do that work are operated on a cost recovery model, right? So the cost of the permits is the cost of the staffing and the labor that will do this work. And so the supervisor is working through a couple of different avenues to find that funding. But since our board has already approved this, the end result for somebody that's the property owner is that your permit fees are waived. The county will still do the effort of identifying those funds in our budget to make sure those revenues are replenished to our departments. But that's again the county's problem. That's the supervisor's problem and our problem, not the problem of any individual homeowner.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Eva, I think your second question is something for the SBA representative, and so I'll have somebody backstage answer that for you, or we'll send it to them. That has to do with land grant and how do we get information about this or apply. Robert Chong wants to, let's see, does the fee waiver also apply to school fees?
The answer to that is no. school fees are determined by the individual school district that your property is located in. And school districts, given their financial challenges, generally speaking, are not very likely to waive those fees simply because they are, as we all know, local school districts in California have been struggling with lower enrollment, and so revenues are down. So I don't believe that they are going to be waiving those.
Okay, and then probably a similar question, but outside of county fees being waived, what are other fees that we need to be prepared to pay?
Yeah, so typically speaking, you will interact with county departments, but you will also need to work very directly with other utilities to get your connections reestablished. So you will likely need to pay a fee to get a will serve letter from your water company, along with any other fees associated with your water infrastructure in case you need a new meter, you need to build a new lateral, things like that. School fees are obviously another one. If you are building in, I believe it's greater than 10% of the valuation, and please don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert on that. You will be assessed school fees. But aside from that, that's really just the normal gist of it. To get to building permit issuance, you won't have any fees that are associated with the county. With inspection, you won't have any fees that are associated with the county. So those are the ones that I'm generally aware of.
Okay, very good. That certainly answers that question. Hey, Don, I see you're on. Were you going to answer that question about the grant? No, you're not.
I don't think that was for me, was it?
I think it was for Corey. We'll try to Ava, we'll try to get to that. We'll try to get you that information. So and we answered Victoria's question. Okay, I think that's better unless there last call for questions. All right, well, let's have everybody come out of the green room, and I'll throw it back to Gerard Wright, our fearless leader from the Greater Los Angeles Realtors. And thank you, Anish. Very good presentation. Thank you very much. I mean, it was stuff a lot of us didn't know. So glad to see things are moving along. But thank you.
Absolutely.
Gerard?
Yes. All right. Thank you, Anish, again for that update on some very important bits of information regarding waiving fees and what that can do to help on the rebuild. Because I think that is, I know, something very top of mind that your boss has in regards to housing production since she's been on the County Board of Supervisors since 2016 and even before that. So I know that's near and dear to her heart and our hearts as well. So thank you for sharing that. I have the honor and privilege of just closing us all out, and I want to thank the team that is on. You might see us on our Brady Bunch kind of squares. Elizabeth Carteret from the Southland Regional Association of Realtors, Jim Clark from the Arcadia Association, as well as Rancho Southeast Association of Realtors, Ryan Barrett from the Pasadena Foothill Association of Realtors, Kimberly Joe from CAR, and my colleague Gary Jamkochian from Greater LA Realtors. Thank you all so very much for your collaboration on this. And I want to close with a few things that I think, Elizabeth, you got something on screen that you want to share. If you're still dealing with for folks who are trying to deal with someone that needs emotional support or needs someone to talk to during this time, especially because this is still a process. It's still 6-7 months in, and it is, it's still a daunting task, but it's just you take one step at a time. And one of those steps is just having someone to talk to. If you need to reach out, please call the Department of Mental Health helpline at 800-854-7771. That's so vitally important during that time, or you can scan on that QR code to get the help you need from a mental perspective, but also that just helps on the recovery. Like taking that one step is an important step, just to say, hey, I need help, and then from there where that takes you, because that's also an important part of rebuilding, not just the physical rebuilding of the structures and home, because a home is, what we have physically, but it's also what we have emotionally and what we have mentally inside of each and every one of us. So with that, I will close and say again, thank you all so very much for your participation, your continued interest. The slideshow and slides, resources, that will come at probably next week when we get that all to everyone for everyone who's registered. We will send out the recaps in our respective networks, as well as to other associations that who are want to join and want to learn more. We will definitely share this out to everyone at that moment in time. So with that, happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of the week. Take care. And if you're outside in the sun, stay cool. If you're inside in the cool air conditioning, go outside and warm up. So there you go. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.